Using the bathroom should be a pretty no big deal part of life. But for people with urge incontinence, that's folks who have to pee all the time and folks who experience sudden major urges out of nowhere, it's a huge deal. On today's episode of Taking the Floor, we'll hear about a real-life experience with urge incontinence and just what an impact it can have. In part 2 of this episode, we'll get into lots of helpful guidance for how to manage urge incontinence. Stay tuned.
I would almost have to pee like 3 times before I could even be ready for the run. I didn't think it would happen this early. I always thought it would happen to much older people. I didn't think it would happen to me.
Welcome to Taking the Floor, the podcast from Hinge Health about pelvic health, movement, and taking charge of your well-being. I'm Candice Dorosky. I'm a pelvic health physical therapist, and I work closely with the team at Hinge Health that creates our app. I help make sure our exercise therapy, education, and other offerings are effective, easy to use, and clinically sound.
And I'm Bijal Toprani. I'm also a pelvic health physical therapist. You'll see me in lots of places around the Hinge Health app, demonstrating exercise therapy movements. And I also work closely with our business teams to get our program into the hands of more people like you. When most people think of pelvic floor dysfunction, they probably think of stress incontinence. That's leaking when you sneeze or jump or laugh. But for a sizable portion of Hinge Health members working to improve their pelvic health, urge incontinence is their major pelvic floor issue. This means having to pee frequently, often suddenly, and whether your bladder is actually full or not. And this type of incontinence is not associated with a stressor like jumping or sneezing. Some research suggests that almost a quarter of women with incontinence experience urge incontinence, and almost a third have what's called mixed incontinence, which is a combination of stress and urge symptoms. For most people, normal urination is at about 7 times a day, with 2 to 4 hours between trips to the bathroom. But if you have urge incontinence, you know it feels almost impossible to wait that long. And that frequent, sudden need can start to feel like it's taking over your life.
You know, we hear from so many people that they just have always had to pee all the time, and they're getting to their house and rushing to the door and trying to put their key in the door, and that's when they're having leakage. And, many people don't realize that there are treatments for something like this, or that it's actually a problem in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like with urge incontinence, it's almost like this habit that we kind of don't pay attention to. Like if we're bored or we walk past our bathroom, a lot of us are working from home more. So we're just kind of like have access to the bathroom all the time. If you get up to go grab a snack, you'll just go anyways because you see the restroom there, and that kind of like perpetuates some of these urge symptoms. So you kind of don't know if you really have to go or if you're just going just because, which we'll kind of talk about later on as well. So today we're actually going to hear a story from a member whose name is Uzma. She has urge incontinence, and her experience gets really to the heart of how urge incontinence can make it so hard to just deal with your regular everyday life, but also that you don't have to just live with it. Just a note that when you hear Uzma mention Lisa, that's her health coach here at Hinge Health.
In part 2 of this episode, we'll get down to the nitty-gritty and give you some helpful real-world advice for managing urges and slowing down your bladder over time. But first, let's hop in and hear a little bit of Uzma's story.
When I first started walking the beach, I could get to my work, park my car, and go for this walk. And, the goal was to do 10,000 steps. I was trying to be healthy. And I could do the 10,000 steps and come back, and I was perfectly fine. And then 2 years into it, I realized that I got a sensation that I had to use the bathroom halfway in the middle. And, normally there are no bathrooms on the beach or on the side of the road. And so that kind of concerned me. And I thought, oh, it's the morning coffee that I'm drinking. It got to a point where I would carry tissue with me because I wasn't sure. I couldn't run the distance with the pressure buildup. I couldn't just freely take a walk on the beach for more than an hour because I never knew. I always knew where the bushes were, or are there no people watching me? And then I was afraid I'd get a fine. And so, this was getting very serious because I'm in a public place and this is not what I should be doing. Um, but if I got a fine, my mind was, how would I explain it? So there were a lot. Yes, I wouldn't be embarrassed about it, but I guess I always had on the back of my mind that would the policeman understand my urgency? As far as my family is concerned, I think they kind of got used to what I used to call anxiety pee. That's the name I gave it. They knew that if we were going somewhere, mom had to use the restroom 3 times. Um, and they're like, within 15 minutes, why do you have to go 3 times? They're all boys in the household. We don't have another girl. So that didn't help. But they just kind of got used to the fact that I would use the restroom. Like they'd all sit in the car and I'd run out of the car and say, I need to go one more time.
Wow. Yeah. So hearing her talk a bit about like how much anxiety she had and how it even got to the point where she was like worried that she would get a fine or that the police officer would like question her is I think it really just speaks to how much this does impact people's lives. I think sometimes we really think of it as this like, okay, whatever funny thing, mom always has to pee and we always have to stop. And we don't really think about these types of things, right? Like what's going on in someone's head in an everyday experience and how much that in and of itself probably creates a ton of anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's the part that really struck me was the cognitive load, like just the constant on your mind. Okay, what if this happens? Then what do I have to do? Then what if I do get pulled over or whatever it is? And I think that just speaks to the experience that like a lot of women have just in day-to-day life where you're having to plan out a lot of things. And it's kind of like that silent suffering of a pelvic health condition, right? Something that you don't normally see, you can't see with the naked eye that, oh, she's getting up to go to the restroom all the time. But it's the fact that even when she is back in the car or they're back on their way to wherever they're going, her mind is still on it, which is really, really tough. And why we like treating these symptoms so much because of the impact they can have on even someone's mental health and anxiety levels.
And something that's really not uncommon for me is to hear from people how much this issue urgency really impacts their life at work. And that's not something that we think about every day. But, I'm often hearing how people have to schedule their meetings around their pee breaks and how, they feel like they are missing out on opportunities to connect with other coworkers because they just have to kind of pre-plan everything around the bathroom. And this is certainly something that Uzma told us a lot about. So let's hear a little bit about how this was affecting her work life.
I had to make sure that I went to a bathroom before a meeting. I couldn't just join a 9 o'clock meeting without preparing to make this rest stop in the bathroom. Because if that meeting went past 10 o'clock or 10:30 or rolled into 11, I was just very, very uncomfortable. Then I had to train myself to tell them, I will join you for 15 minutes. Let's get the critical aspects, issued, resolved. And then I would have to step out and, use the restroom to be comfortable for the rest of the meeting.
So this really strikes me as pretty important because I feel like when I'm having my work meetings, right? I think we can all relate to this. The last like 5 minutes are where you're actually coming up with all of the actionables and the next steps and like all of this really critical information. And at the same time that all of that is happening, Uzma's also thinking about, oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable and I have to go to the bathroom. And what if I don't get to? So it's like something that's already so taxing, during a meeting, a really critical time now becomes even more taxing because of what she's dealing with her urgency and with this anxiety.
Yeah. And I was even thinking about like that few minutes before a meeting, right? For me, because you know me, I like to like really get organized and I like to have like my agenda and the things that I want to talk about in the meeting. And how could you possibly be able to do that, right? When you're kind of like, I need to get to the bathroom at this point, and that is your brain's main focus at that time. And I think focus is a great word to think about here. And we all have different types of careers, but we all do need to be able to kind of like, when we need to do our tasks, we need to be able to focus. And it sounds like Uzma was having a really hard time being able to do that with her urgency.
Yeah, 100%.
But what's really interesting is that Uzma actually came to Hinge Health because she was dealing with knee pain. And that was making it hard for her to do her daily running. But in working with her health coach and her physical therapist, she actually realized that her pelvic floor issues were really the bigger concern that she was having. And so she began really doing her exercises in the app. She is reading the education, working closely with her care team of her coach and physical therapist. And that really helped her to unlock some of those lifestyle changes that really made a huge impact for her. So we're going to share a couple of elements that she told us about that were especially helpful for her in reducing her urgency.
The most eye-opening one was later I thought, wow, this is common sense. If I'm drinking 2 glasses of water at 8 or 9 because I'm thirsty right before sleeping, definitely I'd have to use the restroom in the middle of the night. And so that was the first change that I made. And the first night I was able to sleep from, say, 9 p.m. to 4 in the morning. I think Lisa got the earliest text she ever received in her life from me saying, I made it through the night.
Yeah, and if you guys didn't get that context, something that Uzma was really struggling with was not being able to sleep through the night without having to get up to go pee all the time. And what I love that she says is that she's like celebrating, like getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I think a lot of people would not celebrate that, but I love that she was like so excited and really celebrating that what might seem like a small win to some people, but for her, it was huge. And her success with the program really didn't stop at just being able to sleep through the night. She saw so many huge improvements, especially with the activities that she loved to do, and everything sort of came together in this just giant lifestyle change for her, which was very positive.
So the first change I noticed was that I did not have that, what I used to call anxiety pee. There was one article that said, don't associate the feeling with these things and changing your mindset. So I did decide to override some of that, my mind sending that signal by saying, Uzma, you can do this run. Let's just try the first day, the second day. So now I don't carry any more tissue with me. Because I got stronger doing the exercises and my knee pain eventually has subsided, I surprisingly was able to run 9 miles. And that was 2 hours without having to use the restroom.
First of all, I think a lot of times as pelvic health PTs, I'm sure you've heard this, Candace, like we talk about retraining your bladder as kind of like working with the toddler, right? Like you have to make these little changes. You almost have to not give in to some of the wants that your bladder or your brain have in order to start this retraining process. And we're going to dive into that later. But it makes me happy that she was able to kind of start that retraining. Like, okay, no, we're not going to give in. We're not going to carry tissues. And maybe that can have this cascading effect on just having these small changes happen. And then also just the impact that like having less of this urge incontinence, less of this anxiety pee need, again, let her do something that's even better for her overall health, right? Now she's able to run 9 miles. Like that's so great for her cardiovascular health. It's probably great for her mental health. So, dealing with the urinary incontinence really has an impact on so many different parts of just well-being and being healthier overall.
I just can't stop thinking about like the weight of that tissue, right? Like tissue is such a lightweight thing, right? But for her, being able to just run without that tissue was like lifting a huge weight off of her shoulders. And she no longer had to think about that burden anymore. And just like the opportunities that opened for her to be able to, run that 9 miles, go for 2 hours without even thinking about using the restroom. And, I think that's why we do this, Bijal, right? I mean, it's the tissue that people don't have to carry anymore. I also really love that she called out that like her knee pain was also doing better, because I think that that's also something that we'll probably dive into at some point along the way, is that this connection between the pelvic floor and other areas of your body, and how really improving your pelvic health can also kind of help catapult the health of your overall well-being.
Yeah. Now I'm just imagining like 100-pound tissue, and it's a really fun image. But yeah, it's this, very heavy weight that she was carrying. So good call.
So we're so grateful to Uzma for sharing her story with us. And I think it really just helps us put into perspective like how common that this issue really can be and how much it can impact people's lives. And, Bijal, I know that you've worked with a lot of people that have had symptoms like this. What do you kind of feel like stood out to you the most from her story?
Yes, I think that what stood out the most, again, was the fact that it just impacts so many different parts of her life. Like, I can't get over that part of it, is the fact that, it's affecting work, it's affecting trips with her family, it's affecting her own activities like running. So just the fact that kind of like needed to always go can really impact so many different parts of someone's life. That's really stood out to me the most. And just the fact that, this is incredibly common, but we kind of joke about it, right? Like, oh, gotta go to the bathroom again. It's kind of this like funny thing, that friends kind of laugh about, but that there are these like cascading effects, and that it can impact even like relationships that you have with your own family or your own workplace. So that's really what stood out the most to me.
Yeah. And I think also, something that we didn't hear a lot about in these clips, but we definitely hear a lot about, is the fact that this can really also result in leakage. And so for some people that have this urgency, they're able to kind of like get to the bathroom, or they've figured out all the details of their life to like prevent that leakage from occurring. But for some, they're not able to, right? And so it is very common for us to also hear about the leakage component to urgency.
Yeah, absolutely. Like these symptoms are really on a spectrum, right? So there's going to be people who have just kind of mild urgency symptoms. They notice it when they first come home from work. They're putting that key in the door. There's people more like Uzma who, it's affecting them multiple times a day. And then there's also what you just mentioned, the fact that it can get so extreme that you're getting this really urgent need to go. And it's also resulting in maybe not making it to the bathroom on time or having leakage issues. So it can really span from more of a mild to a moderate to a more extreme version. But all of them are worthy of getting treatment and very treatable, no matter how severe it is.
Yeah, everybody's case is different, but there's always something that you can do. And that is what we are always here for, to really chat with each person individually and give them a plan that's going to work for them.
In part 2 of this episode, we'll really get into the PT perspective on urge incontinence, why it happens, and what you can do about it. We hope you found Uzma's story helpful. Here are the 3 most important things we hope you take away from part 1. First, stress incontinence is not the only form of incontinence. Urge incontinence is very common and can be a sign of a problem with your pelvic floor or an issue with how your brain and your bladder communicate.
Second, Urge incontinence can have a major impact on your quality of life. Having to use the restroom all the time or suddenly having an emergency level need to pee affects so many things throughout everyday life.
And third, it is possible to improve these symptoms. Urge incontinence isn't just something you have to live with forever. Remember that part 2 of this episode is all about what to actually do about urge incontinence. So please give it a listen.
Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you're dealing with pelvic floor issues, you're not alone, and we're here for you. The information contained in this podcast is intended to be used for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice or treatment for any specific condition. Please consult with your healthcare provider with any questions you may have about your medical condition or treatment. Check out your Hinge Health app library for new episodes coming soon.